Hello and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep IAS. A very warm good noon to everyone. I hope all of you are doing good. I welcome you to today's session of discussion on the GS paper 2 of the mains test series. I hope all of you gave this test. I hope all of you attempted most of these questions, if not all. Today we'll be discussing what could have been the answers to these questions, what you should have written, what are the main pointers so that you can expand on that later on. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll wait for a couple of minutes. Let others also join in, and then we'll begin the session. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, good afternoon. Piyush, I have an evening class as well, man. So, yes, hectic day. Good afternoon, guys. Good afternoon. Perfect. So, once again, I welcome you all to today's class. I hope all of you are doing good. Thank you so much for joining in. The purpose of this session is, as all of you know, to discuss the mains test series. You would have all given test number 3. This test number 3 was based on GS2. We have questions from Indian polity, some questions from governance, some questions, a bit of this. And then in the next session, we might have GS2 paper from IR as well. But this time around, there were 20 questions, mainly from polity and governance. I would say most of the questions were not very difficult to attempt. So you should have written, if not the perfect answer, at least some answer. We will be discussing those questions one by one. As in the last session, we will be discussing the main pointers. What are the main pointers that you should have included in your answers? I hope that once you get your corrected copies, your feedback, you would be able to learn from your mistakes. So let's begin without any further delay. The first question was this. Question number 1 was: basic structure doctrine has severely undermined the supremacy of the Indian Parliament, critically examined. Now, when you have these kind of statements and then it tells you critically examine, in simple terms, you are expected to write both sides of the story, yes and no. For example, what do the critics do? When a movie comes out, the critics tell you about the movie by telling the positives as well as the negatives of it. Similarly, when the question is about basic structure doctrine and it is asking you to critically examine, that means it is expected that you will write certain yes and no both the points. So, what you have to write here? Basically, the question is basic structure doctrine. How has it undermined the supremacy of parliament? Undermined the supremacy means how it has gone beyond the parliament's power, cut down on the parliament's power. And on the other hand, you're also expected to write how the basic structure doctrine is good for us, how it has not undermined the power. Pretty simple question. I'm sure all of you in Indian polity would have read about the basic structure doctrine. The idea that started in 1973 originated from the Keshwanda Bharti case, which can be a part of your introduction. In the introduction, you can either define what is a basic structure doctrine, you can say or you can tell where was it introduced, how did it all start. Now, the question about basic structure doctrine is asked because of two big reasons. First big reason, as you know, because it was given in 1973, meaning that this year completes 50 years of the basic structure doctrine, right? 50 years of the doctrine have completed. So that is why it is relevant, number one. Second thing that you have to understand, in the past few months, you have seen the Supreme Court and the government of India coming face to face with each other, criticizing each other. The government criticizing the Supreme Court for undercutting its powers. That is why it is in discussion. So in the main body, as I said, you have to write about both the sides of the story. Yes, how has the Supreme Court, through the basic structure doctrine, undermined the power of the parliament to make laws? On the other hand, how the basic structure doctrine has also helped us. In the conclusion part, you will say that there has to be a balanced approach between the two. On one hand, while parliament supremacy is important, parliamentary sovereignty is important. On the other hand, even the power of judicial review, the power of basic structure doctrine is as important. So, in the main body, these are the things that you could have written. On the positive side, what is the need of the basic structure doctrine? First major need, it limits the amending power of the parliament. So it makes sure that the parliament cannot randomly make any changes in the constitution. There are at least some limits. It also opens the ground for judicial supremacy, meaning that it ensures that the Supreme Court at the end of the day can keep an eye on the parliament, can keep an eye on the constitution. However, the other part of the problem here is it has a potential for judicial overreach. What do you mean by judicial overreach? I'm sure all of you would have read. There is judicial overreach, then there is judicial activism. Judicial activism is positive. That means when the judiciary helps people going beyond their power, it becomes judicial activism. But on the other hand, when the judiciary is trying to take away powers of the parliament, when the judiciary is saying that we will decide how the law will be changed, that is judicial overreach. Other problem with the basic structure doctrine is that the interpretation is not exact. There is no definition of what do you mean by basic structure of the Indian Constitution. The courts, the judges themselves, the Supreme Court judges randomly can decide what is basic structure and what is not basic structure. All these are issues with the basic structure doctrine. It limits the powers of the parliament, the same parliament that has been elected by the people of India. It also allows judiciary to take up a lot of powers which already have powers under Article 142. It allows the scope for judicial overreach, and it also is not fixed. For different judges, definition of basic structure can be very different from each other. These are the important pointers that you have to write. Okay, Ruchita is saying, but in our constitution, but in Indian case, constitution is supreme, not the parliament. Yes, Ruchita, that is what we are saying. We have to ensure that there is constitutional supremacy. The reason why we are writing this phrase is because it is in the question itself. If you look at the question itself, sorry, I'll take you back to the question. The question itself says supremacy of Indian parliament. That is why we are saying parliamentary supremacy is being undermined. If you have to write from yourself, you will not say that the parliamentary supremacy has been compromised. So these are the positive pointers from here to here, and these are the negative pointers of having the basic structured doctrine. In the end, you would have to conclude how, in an ideal world, there has to be a balance between the two, the balance of the power of judiciary, the power of judicial review, and the power of the parliament to make a law and to make changes in the law. The second question in the test was about Representation of People Act. The question says, the Representation of People Act has been instrumental in shaping the electoral landscape of India, but failed to effectively decriminalize politics. Analyze the statement citing the important provisions of the Act. Now, what is the problem here? The problem in the question here is that there are two Representation of People Act, not one. As you know, there are two RPAs. There is Representation of People Act 1950 and the Representation of People Act 1951. The question itself does not clearly define which act is it talking about. Is it talking about the 1950 Act or the 1951 Act? So in your answer, you cannot assume one of the two. If this is a question, in order to be safe, it is expected that you mention both and not just one of these two. Now, why is it in the news? Why is the question being asked? It is in the news because, as you know, Rahul Gandhi was disqualified from the Lok Sabha for violating the Representation of People Act 1951. It is for its violation that he had to resign, or he was disqualified from the membership. That is why it was in the news. Now, in the answer, we will write a few important pointers about these two, and then we will write the reasons why it has not been able to decriminalize politics. Why is it that in Indian politics we still have criminals taking part in the parliament? That is what the main body will be. Let's see. So in the main body, You can first give certain provisions of the RPA, both representation of people at 1950 and 1951. I'm not saying that you have to remember and mention all the provisions, but just the important provisions would be good enough. Provisions about what happens during elections, or what provisions does it have after election. It talks about the candidates disclosing the election expenditure. The candidates have to register any election disputes, any disqualification of members during the election. Also, it talks about not to have corrupt practices, how to conduct elections. All this is a part of RPA 1950-51. However, despite all these provisions, they have not been able to decriminalize politics. This is where you have to write the second part of your answer. Why have they not been able to decriminalize politics? First, the disqualification only happens after conviction. So there is a law that says members of parliament will be disqualified if they get a jail term, a punishment of 2 years or more than 2 years. So you know that 2 years, more than 2 years, if anyone gets a jail, they will be disqualified. What is the problem here? The problem here is a lot of these members of parliament, they have been charged with the crime. Investigation is still going on, but it has not been proven so far. Because the crime has not been proven so far, they have not been disqualified. The disqualification happens only on conviction. That is why there are so many people in the Lok Sabha, in the Rajya Sabha, who are still working because the investigation is still pending on them. So we still have criminals in politics. In fact, 43% of the current Lok Sabha members have a criminal case against them. 29% of the Lok Sabha members right now have serious crimes against them. We also have a problem of low rate of conviction. Low rate of conviction means out of all the people who are charged with the crime, very few people are those on whom the crime has been proven. So number of people on whom the crime is proven are very low, conviction rate remains low. Prevalence of money and muscle power. Despite knowing very well that there are some cases with a criminal background, political parties still give them the tickets. Political parties still want them to fight elections. Why? Because they have money, they have influence, they have muscle power. They can force the people to come and vote. And thus, every political party wants that. Next reason, due to which our politics has not been decriminalized, lack of independent mechanisms to investigate and prosecute electoral offences. Right now, if you do not follow these laws, your investigation usually is done by the Election Commission of India. Although the Election Commission of India, at least on paper, is an independent constitutional body, but in most cases, for those who belong to the ruling party, against whom the Election Commission does not really take a lot of action. These are some of the reasons why we still have criminalization in politics, why we still have criminals in politics. That is why the Representation of People Act have not been as successful as we had hoped for. Next is question number 3. The third question was, where other democracies of the 20th century failed to deliver, the Indian democracy has prospered due to timely tweaks made by the Election Commission. Substantiate. In simple terms, there are two parts of this question. First part is, other democracies are faltering in the 20th century. So there are many democracies in the world that are not working properly. At the same time, Indian democracy is working well thanks to the Election Commission. So you have to talk about, one, the reasons for their failure, and two, what is it that works for Election Commission? What are the initiatives that they have taken to make Indian democracy successful? So on one hand, talk about the failure of the other democracies. On the other hand, talk about the success of Indian democracies. Why is it that our democracy has become successful? These are the two things that you have to mention here by giving examples of what the Election Commission has done. Let's see. First, why is it that other democracies have failed? First, military coup. You see around us in our neighborhood, you see countries such as Pakistan. Look at countries such as Myanmar. These countries have become very, very used to having a military overrule. Myanmar is under the rule of the military. It's been over 2 years now. Pakistan is so used to military coups that in the history of Pakistan, no democratically elected prime minister has ever completed 5 years. Do you know that? No democratically elected prime minister in the history of Pakistan has ever completed a 5 year term. So when you have a situation where military keeps on throwing away the government, you always have a situation when it becomes normal for the military to come in. Corruption and malpractices in election. It is again becoming extremely common. There are countries such as, let's say, Brazil. Look at not just Brazil, look at Venezuela. All these countries have been facing corruption, malpractices in elections, especially those who are in power. They don't want to leave the majority, they don't want to leave power, so they conduct elections in such a way that it is almost impossible to win the elections. Then there is a rise of totalitarianism. For example, let's talk about Russia. Let's talk about Belarus. Now, these countries may have own democracies. Russia says we are a democracy, Belarus says we are a democracy, but they are a democracy in which, when the elections happen, their leader gets 99, 98% of the votes, while other people get 0.2, 0.3, 0.5% of the votes. So there is a rise in authoritarianism and totalitarianism. Despite on paper being a democratic country, most of these countries are seeing a rise in governments taking all the powers in their own hands. These are some of the things that other democracies around the world are facing a problem with. That is why they are declining. Second part of the question was the role that Election Commission of India has played in India's successful democracy. What has the Election Commission of India done to ensure that our democracy remains successful? First, conducting timely elections. See, there are things that we in India take for granted. Like we take it for granted that yes, after 5 years there will be election. What is so special in that? But it is special. Special because it doesn't happen in many countries. In most countries, you do not have timely elections. Governments don't leave their seat. In the history of India, doesn't matter which party is in power, in the history of India, it has never ever happened that a government has lost elections but they have refused to vacate. It has never ever happened in India. But in many democracies, it does happen. Look at Donald Trump himself. We talk about America being a developed democracy, look at them. But in India, that is not the case. Second, independence of Election Commission of India. One of the reasons why our democracy is so successful and thriving is that our Election Commission of India works independently. They don't work under the government. They don't take orders from the government. They decide on, for example, everything about the elections: election date, election schedule, when, how, where the elections will be held, registration of political parties, recognition of political parties. All of that is decided by the Election Commission of India independently. There have been election reforms they have introduced time and time again. Like, for example, there is a limit on election expenditure. There is a limit on election expenditure. Then, photo ID cards, like the voter ID cards that we have today. Voter ID cards earlier did not used to have photos. Now they are photos, etc. The EVM machines. All of these are new initiatives, electoral reform launched by the Election Commission. Electoral conduct, they have model code of conduct and they enforce it also, which again ensures that the democracy in India is thriving. They also educate voters, encourage them to participate. You see a lot of different types of functions organized by the Election Commission to encourage the people to come and vote. New initiatives are being taken. For example, remote voting. You would have read this. The Election Commission of India is trying to make sure that we have remote voting. So those who have shifted from one state to the other state internally also, they can come and vote. All these are initiatives taken by the Election Commission. These are some of the things that you could have written in the main body. about what are the different examples of initiatives that the Election Commission has taken. That is how the Election Commission has been able to keep India's democracy thriving. Next was question number 4. Fourth question was, freedom of religion guaranteed by the Indian Constitution is reasonably restricted. Elucidate citing examples. You all know freedom of religion is a part of our fundamental rights. However, just like most other fundamental rights, freedom of religion also is not absolute. Remember this. Freedom of religion is not absolute. What does it mean? What it means is that yes, you have the freedom to profess your religion. Yes, it has the freedom to go ahead and ensure that you can uh, practice your religion, but it has to come with certain restrictions. For example, it is not that the government of India cannot interfere in your religion. There are many examples that we will take here where the government has interfered in religion. I'll give you a couple of examples. Banning of sati is an example of how government has interfered. Banning of triple talaq, again an example of how government has interfered in religion. Then increasing the age of marriage. Increasing the age of marriage. Again, an example of how freedom of religion does not mean that you can have any religion. It doesn't really mean that you can follow whatever you wish. There are always certain restrictions that have been imposed despite you having the freedom of religion. These are some of the examples that you have to give here. Let me show you some other specific examples how the government has interfered in freedom of religion. First, the triple talaq case. 2017, the Supreme Court banned triple talaq. The government has also made laws against triple talaq. The government even regulates religious institutions. For example, Sri Sai Baba Sansthan Trust was taken over by the government due to allegation of corruption and mismanagement. In simple terms, freedom to run your religious institution does not mean that you have the freedom to misuse or corrupt your religious institution. If the government thinks that you are not running your religious institution properly, if the government thinks that they should run it, the government has a right to interfere, intervene, and they will do that. The government has also introduced many social reforms, as I said. Banning of sati is an example of that, increasing the age of marriage. It all is an indication how the government, the Supreme Court can interfere. For example, you can also give example of the Sabrimala Mandir. Who can go, who can visit to the Sabrimala Mandir, who cannot. All of that is again an example of how Supreme Court, how the government can intervene in religion. This is also because, and we have discussed this earlier, see, the definition of secularism is very different in India and in Western countries. Western countries have a very different form of secularism, while India has a very different form of secularism. Like in India, secularism doesn't mean that the government is separate from religion. In India, government says we can interfere in religion for the benefit of the people. If the government thinks that by interfering we can benefit the people, government will. In Western countries, government says that we will not interfere. So the form of secularism, the definition of secularism is different in different countries altogether. Next was question number 5. To what extent it can be argued that the Indian Constitution is primarily influenced by the Government of India Act of 1935? Give reasons to substantiate your view. You all know that the Constitution of India is a borrowed constitution. Borrowed as in Constitution of India has provisions which we have taken from different types of constitutions. There is some from US, there is some from UK, even South Africa, Canada, etc., etc. But the biggest part of India's constitution is the one that we have taken from the Government of India Act of 1935. The Government of India Act of 1935, the provisions it had, a lot of those provisions in some way or the other exist in our constitution even today. These are the examples that you have to give in this question. Again, the question is asking that a large part of India's constitution is influenced by the Government of India Act of 1935. So you have to give examples, you have to tell how is that possible. So over here, you have to give relationship between Indian constitution of today and the Government of India 1935. Mention the provisions that have been taken from the act in the Indian constitution. Let me give you some examples. A lot of constitution provisions that we have today have been taken from what Government of India in 1935 said. For example, India is a federal country. This concept of federalism has been taken from the Government of India Act of 1935. 1935 Government of India talked about federalism means dividing power between center and the states, between the union and the provinces. That exists even today. Even today, some powers are with the center government, some powers are with the state governments. Government of India in 1935 said India should be a bicameral country, or we have a bicameral parliament. This bicameralism means having two houses of parliament. This is also something that we took from the Government of India Act of 1935. As you know, we have the Lok Sabha and we have the Rajya Sabha. This again was taken from Government of India Act of 1935. We even have provincial autonomy. What is provincial autonomy? Provincial autonomy means giving more freedom, more autonomy to the provinces or the states. Now, in today's time, you all know that in India, we are a federal country, state governments have their own power. For example, police comes under the state government, land comes under the state government, water comes under the state government. So, state governments have their own autonomy. All that has been taken from the Government of India Act of 1935. There are other examples that you can give about judicial system, that is the Supreme Court that we have today. Having a Supreme Court kind of a structure also was taken from the Government of India Act of 1935. When you read about the features of Indian Constitution that have been taken from other countries, you can include more points here as well. If you remember those points that are about the point, how different types of powers of the Government of India Act were taken in the Constitution. Okay, before question number 6, Netra has a question. Netra is saying, but marriage age is not a part of religion. Netra, it is. It is. I'll give you an example. When the British came here and the British increased the age of marriage for girls, it led to a lot of religious protest. For example, when the British came here and they increased the age of marriage, do you know Bal Gangadhar Tilak protested quite a lot? Bal Gangadhar Tilak said that no, you are interfering in our religion. It is our religious religion. We should decide. So it is a religious part. Then you come to the Islamic religion also. Recently, there was this issue, and it has still been going on, that what should be the minimum age of marriage. As per the law in India, minimum age of marriage for girls is still 21. But as per the Sharia law, as soon as the girl attains puberty, she can be married. That is 15. So again, there is a point of religion dictating what should be the age of marriage. So age of marriage has always been a part of religion. It's not, it should not be. Okay. Then question number 6. Question number 6 was, a strong democracy has its foundations in its strong institutions. In the light of this statement, explain the basic tenets on which Indian extra constitutional bodies are based on. Now, what do you mean by extra constitutional bodies? Basically, extra constitutional bodies, as the name suggests, are those bodies which are beyond the constitution. Beyond the constitution, for example, they can be statutory bodies also. They can be executive bodies also. So extra constitutional means bodies which are not written in the constitution but still have been created. Now, these bodies that you see being created, they have played a major role in India having a strong democracy. You have to tell what are the basic tenets, mean basic values on which they are based. So you have to tell about different institutions, different examples can be given, and what are the basic values that they have to follow or they should follow. Now, usually, when you see this question, many people may get confused because you don't read about this specifically. There is no one chapter in your book where you read about this, that what are the basic tenets of extra constitutional bodies or how extra constitutional bodies should work. But this is a very generic, common sense based question. It's a question that says that ideally, our extra constitutional bodies should have what kind of values in mind. So, what kind of values should they ideally be? For example, they should be unbiased, they should be free of any pressure, they should be independent, autonomous. All these are the basic tenets or values based on which these institutions actually work. So, the basic tenets of these are they have to be independent, they have to be impartial, they have to be non partisan. Non partisan means unbiased or not belonging to any party. Over here, you can give some examples as well. For example, let's say you can give example of National Human Rights Commission. You can give example of, let's say, National Commission for Women, National Minority Commission. All these examples can be given. How they should work, how they should give reports, even if these are reports against the government, because they are not here to protect the government, they are here to protect our democracy. These are the basic values which should be followed by these extra constitutional bodies. It may be statutory bodies, it may be executive bodies as well. See, in these discussions, we are only giving you the main pointers of the main body. I'm not saying that in the answer you should write only this much. I expect you to expand on this in 1 or 2 lines at least when you write this in the answer. So this pointer, for example, that you see here is not the only thing that you have to write. Expand on this a little bit so that you can actually have enough words to write about this kind of an answer as well. Question number 7. Under what circumstances can the president rule be imposed in a state? What consequences follow when such a declaration remains in force? I'm sure all of you would have found this question extremely easy. This is by far the easiest question, very straightforward question. All of you would have read about President rule. President rule, also called as a state emergency. All of you would have read about this. You have to tell number one, why is it imposed? What are the circumstances that it can be imposed? And what happens when it is actually imposed? Now, sorry, not 250, 356, not 352. So you have to tell about the consequences of president's rule, or when, why, in what circumstances it imposed. As you know, president rule is imposed under Article 356 and Article 365. These are the two articles that talk about the situation, the circumstances under which president's rule can be imposed. What is 356? Article 356 means that the president can declare president rule if the president gets a report from the governor, or even without the report. If the president believes that the state is not being run as per the constitution, if the president believes that it is not possible to run the state as per the provisions written in the Constitution of India, then in that case, the President of India can impose president's rule. Article 365 also has a provision. Article 365 says, if a state does not comply with orders given from the central government, again present rule can be imposed. By the way, can you give me examples of this? Can you give me example of situations where central government gives order to state and they don't accept, then present rule can be imposed? Is it for any order or some specific orders have to be accepted? What do you think? Is it for any order, that any order by central government not accepted by the state will result in state emergency? Or is it only for some few orders? Tell me the circumstances. What do you think? Okay, Ruchita. If, for example, let me give you an example. If the central government gives an order to the state that tomorrow go and Prime Minister is coming, book the entire stadium. And if the state government says, no, we will not do that, would it lead to president rule? What do you think? The question is simple. In what circumstances or what orders, if they are not accepted, will lead to president rule? It is not all the orders. It is not all the orders. There are very few of these orders. There are few orders. I'll tell you which are these orders. Number one, if the order is about railway protection. For example, the central government tells the state that please provide protection to railway trains, railway infrastructure, etc. Second, if the order is about welfare of tribals, if let's say central government has started a new scheme for the welfare of the tribal people, state governments don't implement that scheme, that will lead to president rule. So for welfare of the tribals, you have to accept all the orders. Third, apart from this, central government can also give the order to the state government to provide education in mother tongue. To provide education in the mother tongue for minority groups. So any minority groups children living in the state, they should be given education in their mother tongue. This is again an order that the central government can give to the states. If the state governments don't agree, don't accept this order, then again it will lead to president's rule being imposed. Apart from this, there are other circumstances as well. If after the elections, no party gets the majority, governor is not able to elect a chief minister, appoint a chief minister, then also president rule can be imposed. If the government has lost the majority, president rule can be imposed. Or if it is not possible to conduct elections due to any disaster, war, etc. Because of disaster, because of war, you can't conduct elections right now. So you can have president rule for some time. These are circumstances under which the president rule can be imposed. Now tell me the effect of the president rule. What happens when the president rule is imposed? What do you think? What happens when the president rule is imposed? Tell me in the chat quickly. What happens when the president rule is imposed? Tell me. Okay, Ruchita. Ruchita, what is the effect exactly? Effect on center relation, fine. But what exactly is the effect? Okay, Afreen. Okay, Priyanka, Ganesh. Neta is saying everything will not be perfect. So, Neta, tell me then what will not be perfect? What will happen? Everything is never perfect. Okay, first, no state government. There will be no state government, right? State government will be removed. Second, rule of center by the rule of center in the state. Rule of center in the state. Third, laws of state will be made by center. Laws of state will be made by the center. Fourth, governor along with bureaucrats will run the state. Governor and bureaucrats will run the state. All these are the impacts that you will see once the state emergency or the present rule comes into picture? It's a very simple, easy question. If you have read Indian polity, you should be able to answer this. This is not very difficult. Next was question 8. Interstate border disputes in Northeast India are far more complex than other parts of India. Examine. Also enumerate various methods available to resolve the issue. Now, you all know amongst the northeastern states in India, there are a lot of issues going on. Look at what is happening in Manipur. Not just Manipur. If you look at other states also, the border disputes are very frequent. Now, what is the reason behind border disputes? See, there are two big reasons behind border disputes. One, if you look at the northeast, Assam used to be the one big state. Assam used to be this one huge state. Then, with the time, a lot of area was carved out of Assam to make new states. Meghalaya, Arunachal, a bit of it, Nagaland, a lot of it was carved out of Assam. So when you have one state and you carve out all the other states from that, you will have a border dispute always. That is one problem with the border dispute. Second problem with the border dispute is the problem of tribals and ethnicity. See, one mistake that most of us commit. When we say tribals, we think all tribals are the same, but that is not true. There are thousands of different tribes having different cultures, different rituals, different backgrounds, different way of learning, living. And it's not that they will always be good with each other. Many tribals don't like each other. Now I'll give you an example. Let's assume this is Assam. Let's assume this is Nagaland. So if there is a tribal living here, tribal family living here, they think our relatives live on this side of the border. They would want this area to be included in this state. So when the tribals are divided amongst different states, they would want the other area also to come to them. That is also a big part of the issue. I'll give you one more example. Have you heard of this place called Dimapur? Have you heard of this place? Dimapur. Have you heard of this? I'm sure you should have. Where is it exactly? Which state? Which state is Dimapur in? Yeah, it is in Nagaland. It is in Nagaland. Dimapur is in Nagaland. Now listen to this very carefully. I'll tell you something very interesting. Do you know, in the 1960s, when the Naga movement was going on, the government of India created a new state called Nagaland. Okay? Now, when the Nagaland state was being created, the problem was Nagaland, the area of Nagaland was entirely hilly area, only hills and mountains. So what is the problem with the hilly area? When you have only hills and mountains and nothing else, you don't have a plain area to build an airport. So there was no plain area where airport could be built. So what was the problem? The government of India wanted an airport. Why? So that if there is a security issue, the armed forces can land in that area easily, and they can carry out their operations. That was the entire idea. That we should have a situation where the armed forces can land in Nagaland, and that is why the airport has to be built. But there was no airport. So do you know what happened? When Nagaland was being created, a new district, a new area was given to this area called Dimapur. Dimapur was never supposed to be a part of Nagaland. It was a part of Assam always. But the area was given to Nagaland because it was a plain area, so that finally we could build an airport and the security forces can actually go and land there. Ever since that, the problem has started because people living in Dimapur, their family, their tribes, all of them live in Assam, and they have been made a part of Nagaland, so they don't like it. These are just some examples of complex issues in the Northeast. The Northeast has complex border disputes because of all of these, and that is why it is not that easy to resolve. That is why you see all these issues come up. First reason, ethnic diversity. As I said, Many different tribes, many different ethnicities, having different cultures, backgrounds. Historical grievances. So historically, they have had complaint. Dimapur is a prime example of historical grievance. Historically, they have not been happy why we are not a part of Assam, why we have been made a part of Nagaland. They don't really seem to be happy with that. Third, geographical challenge. Geographical challenge in the sense that most of these states are hilly areas, dense forest areas. So it is not easy in the hilly areas, dense forest areas to make a border between the two states. Making border between the two states is extremely, extremely difficult when we have these geographical challenges. Because of all of these, we have many unique complexities, many unique problems in the northeast part of India, and their border disputes are very difficult to solve. Now, the question has also asked you suggestions to solve border disputes. These suggestions are not just for the northeast India. Border dispute in any part of the country can be resolved with these solutions only. So even if there's a question to solve border disputes in other parts of the country, even for them, it will be the same kind of a solution. First, negotiate, start a dialogue, use legal remedies like make laws, mediate, arbitrate, find someone as a mediator, some people who are respected by both the parties, have joint border management. For example, if Assam and Arunachal Pradesh have a border dispute, rather than one side looking after the border, we should have both the side looking after the border together. Joint border patrol management, political will, and bilateral agreements. A lot of times, a blame is given to the politician that they don't want to resolve the issue because they want something else. And that is true. A lot of times, politicians don't want to resolve these issues because they are gaining out of it. If they show some political will, if they are able to make some people unhappy, they should be trying to go ahead and sign such agreements. These are the methods using which border disputes in Northeast India and other parts of the country can also be resolved easily. Then we had question number 9. Question number 9 is about something called NALSA, National Legal Services Authority. That is, the question is NALSA or National Legal Services Authority finds itself trapped in a systemic rut, hindering its intended role and purpose. You tell me first, what was the role or what is the role of NALSA? What is NALSA supposed to do? Tell me. Why was NALSA formed? What is it supposed to do exactly? Let's see how many of you know. Okay, Ruchita. Okay, Piyush. Okay, Asif. Dhyana, Akansha. Okay. I'm getting same answer from almost everyone. Pallavi, Amit, Ganesh, MM. Okay. A lot of people giving the same answer. Same answer that I'm getting is give free legal aid. Right? Most of people are giving the same answer, free legal aid. To whom? To the poor section of the society, to the vulnerable section of the society. But do you know this is not the only job of NALSA? NALSA has other jobs as well. NALSA's only job is not to give free legal aid. Apart from that, what do they have to do? They have to raise awareness about laws. That is, make people more aware about the laws. How do the laws work? What are the protections that they have? Organize workshops. All of these are the jobs that NALSA does. It's not just about free legal aid, but the problem is ever since it has been created, it is not very successful. Okay, tell me this also. Don't Google. Who is the head of NALSA? Who is the chairman of NALSA? What do you think? Who is the chairman of NALSA? Let's see if you can tell me. Is it Prime Minister? Is it President? Is it the law minister? Is it the Chief Justice of India? Is it someone else? Or is it appointed by someone? What do you think? Okay, I'm getting correct answer from Asif, Sahil, Piyush. Okay. Think of it. Think of it. Think of it. Think of what Nalsa is doing, and then think of what should Nalsa do. Means Nalsa will be headed by whom? And again, don't Google. Okay. Okay. So basically, Nalsa is headed by the Chief Justice of India. Chief Justice of India. So whoever is the Chief Justice of India becomes the chairman of NALSA. It is their responsibility to ensure that NALSA does well. But again, the question is about why NALSA has not been able to do well. So first, you will talk about the role of NALSA. What do they do? And then you will talk about why have they not been successful, the problems. Role of NALSA, as all of you said, number one, giving free legal aid to the needy poor people, raise awareness among the disadvantaged section of the society. And not just this, they also suggest to the government how to improve legal issues, how to give legal rights to the people, how to have reforms in the prison. All these are the jobs of NALSA. However, they have not been very successful due to various reasons. First, the biggest reason is lack of funding and resources. Now, you might ask, sir, why do they need funding? See, when they ask a lawyer to fight a case for the poor people free of cost, most lawyers agree that okay, we will fight the case free of cost, but you have to give something to the lawyer at least for their traveling, for going from here to here. So every authority needs at least some funding. NALSA lacks funding. Government of India has never really been interested in giving any funds to NALSA. There is lack of awareness. Most people don't even know what NALSA is, why does it exist, how can it help the people. There's lack of awareness. Judiciary has already been overburdened. Right now, as I speak to you today, there are 4.38 crore cases pending in India. 3.48 crore pending cases in India. At such point of time, when you have an overburdened judiciary, you have a situation where the judiciary is not able to work properly. On top of that, you have these cases of NALSA. That is not how the ideal situation should have been. The implementation also is not great. Many times they are not able to find good lawyers who can fight the case freely. Many times they are not able to coordinate between the lawyers and the parties. Lawyers take the case, but after one or two hearing, lawyers don't even come. All these are issues associated with NALSA. Then question number 10, comparison of the constitution. Parliament of Britain is much more powerful than Parliament of India. Elucidate citing major differences between the power and the functioning of the parliaments. Now, see the model of Indian Parliament or the structure of Indian Parliament, the working of Indian Parliament has been based on the British Parliament quite a lot. We have a parliamentary form of government which we took from Britain. We have president as a ceremonial head of the state. We have taken this idea from the British monarch. So it is right to say that we have taken a lot of things from Britain. However, the interesting part is British Parliament and the Indian Parliament are different. I'll tell you the big difference between the two. The big difference is the British Supreme Court does not have the powers of judicial review. They don't have judicial review. So what does it mean? What happens? Because the Supreme Court of Britain does not have the power of judicial review, the result is whatever laws the British Parliament makes, the result is whatever law made by the British Parliament is never struck down by the British Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of Britain cannot strike down a law made by the British Parliament. In other words, British Parliament, it is truly sovereign. Because if they make a law, it cannot be struck down by the court. In India, that is not the case. That is a one big difference, which makes the British Parliament much more powerful. So this is the answer for difference in power. Then comes a different in function part. What is a major difference in function? So basically, India and Britain, both of them have a bicameral legislature. Both of these have two houses, but there's a lot of a difference, especially in the upper house. In India, upper house is the Rajya Sabha. In India, upper house is the Rajya Sabha. In Britain, the upper house is called House of Lords. Now, how are these different? In our Rajya Sabha has slightly lower powers than Lok Sabha, but still Rajya Sabha has a lot of powers. On the other hand, if you look at House of Lords is regarded as one of the weakest upper houses in the world. Why? How do members come in the House of Lords? A lot of members of House of Lords, some seats are hereditary. How hereditary? So what happened was, in Britain, there's a royal family that the entire world knows. But apart from the royal family, also in Britain, there are many small princes, queens, princes, etc., very small here and there. They also had some power in the history. They were given a position in the House of Lords, that you are a member of the House of Lords. And that position is hereditary. After them, someone in the family gets a position. Similarly, do you know in the House of Lords, even the British Church has a representation. So some members from the church are nominated. So their upper house is very different, mostly nominated, even hereditary in many cases. So they have almost no powers to make a law. In India, that is not the case. Thirdly, the executive in Britain, prime minister, ministers, have more power to make policy decisions. In India, for most of the policy decision, you have to pass a law in the parliament. You can't just take a decision from the cabinet, or the prime minister cannot just take a decision. If you have to make any big change in India, it has to be through an act of the parliament. Executive order in India cannot be given on most of the issues. But that is not true in case of England. In case of Britain, their prime minister, their ministers actually have much more power as compared to what Indian executive has. All these are differences between Indian and the British Parliament. Perfect. Next, question number 11. Transparency serves as a vital cornerstone for the smooth functioning and credibility of every institution, especially for the judiciary. In the light of the above, discuss the issues plaguing the judicial system in India, suggest measures to make judiciary more transparent. So basically, you have to tell first the problems in the judicial system in India, and then second, what are the measures that can be taken to make it more transparent. I'm sure all of you are aware of the problems in the judicial system, how it is not friendly to common people, the number of cases that are pending, how it is beyond the reach of the common people. Common people dread going to the court. No one wants to go to the court because everyone thinks judicial system is extremely complex. All of these are issues in the Indian judicial system, starting with first, delayed justice. I want you all to go on Google and type this after the class: National Judicial Data Grid. This is a portal run by the government of India. It gives you the exact number of pending cases in India right now. How many cases are older than 5 years? How many are older than 10 years? How many are older than 1 year, etc. You will see there are so many cases which have been going on for years and years and years. This is an example of justice delayed. See, you see in the news, there are Supreme Court decisions that come in 20, 30, 40 years after what has happened. Just imagine getting a judgment after 40 years. What is the need or what is the use of that judgment? There is also opacity in appointment, there is no openness. The issue of collegium has been discussed multiple times. Supreme Court says collegium is essential for maintaining its independence, but the problem with the collegium system is it is a closed door system. For example, how is the collegium deciding on certain names? What is the logic used by the collegium? How do the collegium appoint some judges? How do they reject some judges? No one knows. It is all in the closed door meeting that all these things happen. So there's lack of openness in the appointment system. Even the judicial proceedings are too complex for common people to understand. How celebrities, famous people get their case heard very soon, and why is it that for a common man, they will get the date after 2 months, 3 months, 6 months? There is opacity in the judicial proceedings. Even the information to the public is very limited. Most of the things are not told to a general public. All these are problems which are plaguing our Indian judicial system. How to improve that? First, use technology. When the COVID-19 crisis was going on, Supreme Court was hearing online cases. They were hearing cases on Zoom, etc. That adds to the impact of justice. Not forcing people to come to the court. Because, see, everyone who is fighting a case in the Supreme Court may not be rich. Everyone who is fighting a case may not live in Delhi. So for them to come all the way to Delhi, if there is an option to attend hearings online, that is always better. Uniform publication of court order. Now, this is also important. What exactly is it? Let's try and understand. Basically, when the court gives an order, they just spell out the order. But actually, there is a written order that has to be given. Let's say you are not happy with the court judgment, you have to go and appeal. You can only appeal when you get a proper written judgment, and that takes some hours. Many times it may take even a few days before the written judgment is given. So the court order, publication of court order is also delayed quite a bit. Delaying of this means that you do not have access to it, you are not able to ensure that you are able to appeal. That also becomes a problem. Having a judicial ombudsman will also. Ombudsman means officer against corruption. Officer against corruption is called ombudsman. Having a judicial ombudsman could help. How? See, there are also allegations that there may be corruption in the judiciary as well. The problem is right now we do not have an officer who looks over the judiciary. Right now we do not have a situation where you can have judiciary that is looked into in their cases, how they conduct themselves. So we need to have an officer that is looking into corruption of the judiciary as well. And then strengthen the appointment process as well. Strengthen the appointment process means making sure that at the end of the day, the appointments that are done at the Supreme Court level or at the, let's say, High Court level, all of these are not done just by the collegium sitting themselves. The collegium also, at the end of the day, must ensure that it is transparent. For example, what is it that the Supreme Court is doing? What is it that the collegium is doing? How is the collegium deciding certain judges? It should be out open in the public. Why is it that the collegium has a closed door meeting? Why is it that the collegium does not tell us who are the people who they are actually contemplating? All these are problems that have to be solved and have still not been solved. Asif is saying, please explain SUPAIS. Okay, Asif. There is a new initiative by the Supreme Court called SUPAIS. S-U-P, sorry, SUPACE, sorry. SUPACE. SUPACE. It's a new portal that has been started by the Supreme Court. The idea is simple. The judges have to learn a lot of things, have to read a lot of things to decide on some cases. Judges do a lot of reading, etc. So SOPACE is a kind of an online portal. With the help of AI, it will help the judges get more information about certain cases. So let's say if the Supreme Court judge is hearing a case on a matter related to railways or tax system. So they want to know what has happened in the past, relevant information, etc. They can use this portal in some cases, which can give them the exact information. That is called SUPACE, SUPACE. Next, question number 12. Discuss the differences between composition and powers of Rajya Sabha and the State Legislative Council. To what extent does bicameralism contribute to the efficiency and accountability of the legislative process? Again, pretty simple question. You all would have read about Rajya Sabha, you all would have read about Legislative Council as well. By the way, how many states in India have a Legislative Council? Can you give me their names? Can you give me the names in India of the states that have a Legislative Council right now? Please tell me the name of those states. Don't just tell me the number. Tell me which states. Okay. Okay, Abhishek, Aditya, Ganesh. Lalam has given all 6. Okay. There is UP, there is Bihar, there is Maharashtra, there is Karnataka, there is Andhra Pradesh, and there is Telangana. These are the only 6 states to have a legislative council as well. Earlier, Jammu Kashmir also used to have one when it was a state. Now it's a UT. It doesn't have the 2 houses now. You have to tell the difference between legislative council and Rajya Sabha, and then you have to tell how bicameralism means having 2 houses. How having 2 houses helps rather than having one single house. So you can make a table also in these kind of questions. Pretty easy, straightforward. How the election is different, number of members, the powers are also different. You all know state legislative councils have almost no power. They cannot even stop the legislative assembly from making an ordinary bill, for passing an ordinary bill. The only thing that they can do, the only thing is that they can delay the bill. How much can they delay the bill, by the way? Maximum. For what maximum time period can they delay the bill? What do you think? Ordinary bill. For what maximum time period can they delay the bill? No, I'm not getting the correct answer. Okay, Pallavi, Lalam. Only 2 people with the correct answer so far. I am getting a hint that many of you have not read Indian polity properly. Please do read Indian polity properly. You should know this. Maximum that they can delay the bill is 4 months. 3 months when the bill comes to them first. When the bill comes the second time, then 1 more month. So maximum they can delay the bill for 4 months, not more than that. That is the maximum that they can do. On the other hand, you also had to write why having 2 houses is important, why having 2 houses can make a difference. First, 2 houses means more representation, more people can come in the lawmaking process. It acts as checks and balances. You can check the power of the lower house. If they are passing or trying to pass a law which is not great, you can stall it at least for some time. Review and revise. You can always review, you can always suggest them that make some changes in the law. If they accept or don't accept, depends upon them. But you can at least suggest them that make some changes in the law. This is how the law should be. This is how the law should not be. All these are important features of having a bicameral legislature. Next, question 13. Political parties, pressure groups, and social movements, 3 different things, have their commonality in being the providers of checks and balances in a democracy. compare and contrast their roles and instruments they use in the Indian context. So basically, it is saying there are three different things: political parties, pressure groups, and social movements. They use different methods to keep a check on the government. So, how do they do that? What instruments do they use? This is what you had to tell. So, we'll discuss about all these three in brief. First, by the way, okay, I'll tell you a couple of answers. First, what is a pressure group? Some people don't know what is a pressure group. Let me first explain that. See, in simple terms, pressure group is a group that can put pressure on the government either to pass a certain law or to not pass a certain law. I can give you two examples. Let's talk about the Lokpal bill. How was a Lokpal bill introduced? Because Anna Hazare, India Against Corruption, they put a lot of pressure on the government to pass the law. That's a pressure group. Similarly, how were the farm bills taken back by the government? Why did the farm bills were taken back by the government? Because there was pressure put on the government by the farm leaders, by the farm associations. Those are pressure groups. So pressure groups can be media, opposition parties, generic, let's say workers group, farmer group, any NGO, even common people can act as pressure groups. Second question that many people have is checks and balances. So Rashi, checks and balance means to keep a limit on someone's power, to ensure that government does not just randomly do whatever they want. There should be some checks on the powers of the government as well. So these things allow the government, allow the power of the government to be checked. How do they help the democracy? Number one, people's participation. They have much more people participation. They allow the people, ask the people to participate in larger numbers. Diverse interest. Some groups may talk about education. Some groups may talk about farmer laws. Some groups may talk about equality. Some may talk about the transgender rights. So rights of all these different types are advocated, and these are diverse interests. They also influence policy making. I gave you two examples: the Lokpal bill and the farm laws. These are opposite examples. One example of how the government was forced to bring a law, and one how the government was pressurized to take back a law. Similarly, they also ensure that there are checks and balances imposed. Abhishek is saying pressure groups include opposition and media. I won't say opposition. Oppositions are political parties, but yes, media can be called as a pressure group. So you can call media as a pressure group. Opposition parties, I won't say. I would say political parties are separate. So there are three different things. What do political parties do? What do pressure groups do? What do social movements do? How are they different? Political parties, as you know, take part in the elections, promise to the people that vote for us, we'll come to power, we'll do this, we'll do that. Pressure groups operate outside the government. Pressure groups are not a part of the government, not a part of the political system. They put pressure on the government either to pass a law or not to pass a certain law. Similarly, we have social movement. Social movement, for example, movement about, let's say, I don't know how many of you remember, after that Nirbhaya case in Delhi, there was that big social movement that there should be death penalty for rape, that then there are movements for rights of the transgenders, rights of the LGBTQ community. All these are social movements. Social movements, again, are not related to politics as such, but all of them have to deal with politicians only. Why? Because at the end of the day, only politicians can make laws in India. So social movement pressure groups may not be directly related to the government, but they have to engage with the politicians because politicians are the only ones who have the real power to actually make a law in India. How are they different? What are the different instruments that they use? Political parties use political campaigning, political speeches, manifestos, etc. Pressure groups, what do? They lobby. Lobby means, again, basically putting pressure on individual politicians. Putting pressure on individual politicians. Telling the politicians, please vote in our favor, we will do this. If you don't vote in our favor, we'll do that. They run media campaigns, they file cases, etc. Similarly, social movements, what do? They protest against the government, they organize strikes, they ask people to come and support them. All of these are ways in which social movements also impact the government. Then question number 14. What are the discretionary powers available to the governor? Do you think that a duty-bound governor, rather than a more powerful governor, is in consonance with the original spirit of the Constitution justified? So there are two parts of this question. First part, what are the discretionary powers of the governor? Discretionary powers means power to take a decision by yourself. You can take a decision by yourself, not on the advice of Council of Ministers. Not on the advice of the Council of Ministers. That is the discretionary power of the governor. As you know, the Constitution of India does not give any discretionary powers to the president. But the Constitution of India does give some discretionary powers to the governor, where the governor can act on his own without asking the advice of the Council of Ministers. What are those situations? First, which bill to send to the President of India? As you know, in certain situations, bills of the state legislature can be sent to the President by the governor. Which bills to send, which bills not to send, is a decision taken by the governor in his own discretion. Recommending the president rule in a state, when there will be president rule, if president rule should be imposed or not. Third, acting as the administrator of a union territory. So, for example, let's say the governor of Kerala has also been named as the administrator of the union territory of Lakshadweep. So, for Lakshadweep, they will not take advice of the Kerala chief minister. They decide, as you know, how much royalty to be given to tribal advisory councils when minerals are exploited and sold. And they also can ask for information from the chief minister whenever they want. All these are discretionary powers of the governor written in the Constitution of India. The Constitution says that in all these things, governor will work on his own mind. Apart from that, there are other situations as well in which the governor may act on his own discretion. Why? Because there is no other option. There are some situations where governor may act on his own discretion. How? While appointing a chief minister, when no party has the majority. When the chief minister passes away, who to make the chief minister immediately, at least for some time? If the party loses the majority, then dismissing a chief minister. All these are situations in which the governor can act on his own discretion. The other part of the question was, whether is it good to have a powerful governor or a duty-bound governor? What is the difference between the two? Powerful governor means a governor that will act on his own, not on the advice of the government. Having a powerful governor means they will keep a check on the powers of the ruling government. They will decide what the government can do, what the government cannot do. The problem with having a powerful governor is it undermines the concept of democracy. If people of the state have given majority to a party, to a chief minister, then that chief minister, that party has a right to run the government. On the other hand, having a duty-bound governor means governor will listen to the Council of Ministers only. Governor will make sure that there is no conflict between the Council of Ministers and the governor itself. All these are arguments given in favor of having a duty-bound governor. So governor on one hand, powerful governor has its own consequences and duty-bound governor has its own consequences. Next was question 15. Although the principles outlined in part 4 of the Constitution cannot be legally enforced. Part 4 of Constitution means you're talking about directed principles of the state policy. They cannot be legally enforced, but the state has given due respect to this part while making laws and policies critically analyzed, citing examples. In simple terms, you have to give examples of laws, policies, other decisions taken that are in line with the directive principles of the state policy. There are a lot of these examples that you can give where policies have been made, laws have been made depending on the directive principle. For example, laws such as reservation for the marginalized community. We have reservation for scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, OBCs, EWS category. All of these are in line with this. You can also give examples of giving a constitutional status to panchayats. The 73rd Amendment Act, it was again a part of directive principles. It has been made into a law. Laws such as right to information, Manrega, banning of alcohol in multiple states, all that is again an example of how the government has implemented laws on the basis of directive principles of the state policy, although they were only advice. The Supreme Court also has talked multiple times about directive principles of state policy. In the famous Olga Tellis case, the court said right to livelihood is an integral part of right to life, and directive principles should promote economic and social justice. There are so many examples. Many states have made laws on cow or to prevent cow slaughter. There are so many other examples that you can give. Yes, as Priyanka is also saying, environmental protection law. There are so many examples that prove that states have kept in mind directed principles of the state policy before actually making these laws. There are limitations and challenges why the directed principles have not been implemented fully. First, financial constraint. Maybe converting directed principles, all of them into state policy, may not be financially feasible for the government of India. Political priorities may be different. That is why some have been converted, some have not been converted so far. For example, Uniform Civil Code. Uniform Civil Code, as you know, is a part of directed principles. It has not been converted into a law because maybe the political parties don't want to do that. So political priorities are different. Lack of awareness amongst the people, lack of literacy. So people don't understand, people don't know what is directed principles, they don't demand it from the government as well. Because of that, also governments have not implemented all the directive principles. Question 16 was about parliamentary committees. Parliamentary committees serve as the engine of legislative scrutiny and ensuring accountability of the executive. In light of the above statement, critically examine the functioning of these committees and suggest reforms. So basically, you have to tell about the problems in the parliamentary committees. And you have to suggest reforms in the parliamentary committees. These are the two things that you have to write. Now, you don't have to write about what are different types of parliamentary committees, functioning, etc. You have to write about exactly what do they do. First, the problems in the functioning of parliamentary committee. What are the issues? First big issue, lack of regular meetings. They hardly have any meetings. They hardly meet, many months pass away. Even the quality of reports they give is not very good. See, for example, I'll give you an example. When the American Parliament, that is Congress, when they actually give certain reports. They are so high quality reports that they're used around the entire world by researchers. In case of India, Indian parliamentary committees don't give that high quality reports. Even how the members will be appointed is a concern. Lot of members of parliamentary committee are appointed because they are from the ruling party, not because they are the best person for the job, but because they are from the ruling party, they are appointed. So there has always been a cause of concern. How can we strengthen these committees? First, increase the number of meetings, allow them to meet more often. Second, have members chosen properly. For example, if there's a parliamentary committee on defense, have those members who have experience in that field. If there's a parliamentary committee, let's say on railways, have people who are working in that field rather than randomly choosing people. Give them enough time to make good, better reports, research well so that the reports are high quality, and give them more power. See, parliamentary committees in the US, which are called the Senate committees, they have a lot of power. Senate committees have called Mark Zuckerberg, Sundar Pichai to come and be a witness. They ask questions to them. In India, you do not see this happening in parliamentary committees. In India, you do not see parliamentary committees having these powers. So parliamentary committees should have the power to call for witnesses, to call for documents, so that they can also have better hearings and better reports. Next question, number 17. Indian federalism, like a resilient tapestry, weaves together like a vibrant fabric of unity and diversity. In the light of the statement, discuss how India upholds its federal spirit amidst unitary provisions in the constitution and the challenges. When you see these kind of questions, many students get confused with this language. Many students get confused with this language. What is the meaning of resilient tapestry? I don't know. My suggestion to you is, if you don't know what is this, you don't have to worry. Just start reading question from here. Forget what is written before this. Forget everything. Doesn't matter. Just start reading question from here and you will be good to go. What is the question? Discuss how India upholds its federal spirit amidst unitary provisions in the constitution. Also discuss the challenges threatening the federal fabric of the country. Simple. That is what it says. Don't think of the first one. Yes, Niharika, you will get model answers. Now, the question is about mainly India's federalism. What are the measures? See, we know India's federalism is made in such a way that union government, central government has much more powers than the state. Even then, there are platforms that are made to ensure proper distribution of power. What are those platforms? Interstate Council, where the center and the state governments come together, discuss important issues. We have made certain autonomous regions, especially in the tribal areas, where central government does not interfere. States have been given autonomy. They have their own police, they have their own land, etc. All these are measures taken to uphold India's federalism. But there are some challenges as well. First, regionalism. People discriminating on the basis of region, not allowing people from other states to come to their states. Tension between the center and the states. Many center and the states have not been on good terms with each other. State governments say center is discriminating against them. They say center is only favoring those states which are ruled by their parties. Then imposition of central policies. A lot of times the state governments don't like the policies made by the center governments. State governments think that the policies made by the center government are not correct. They think that the policies made by the center governments are imposed upon us even though we don't want to. How can we address the challenge? What is being done to make our federalism even stronger? Strengthen the interstate council. We don't have regular meetings for this, so we should have regular meetings so that center and state can discuss their issues. Decentralize more power. Center government should give more power to states, more money to the states, and recognize diversity. We take so much pride in saying that India is a diverse country, unity in diversity. But even then, many people don't like this diversity. Many people like only people like themselves to surround them. But that is not what diversity is. If you really like the country's diversity, you have to recognize it and you have to accept it in the long run. Question 18. The power of judicial review is not meant to be wielded in such a way that judicial wisdom replaces the will of the majority. In this context, critically examine whether judicial activism is antithetical to separation of powers in the Indian context. Antithetical means opposite or something that harms. So basically, you have to write whether judicial review is against the power of the majority, the will of the majority. Whenever again the question is critically examine, what did I tell you? Critically examine means both positive and negative. Critical examine means try and make sure that you give both positive as well as the negative parts of the story. Just giving one part of the story, just giving the positive would not really do justice to it. Make sure that you write both positive pointers as well as the negative pointers about how judicial activism is required and how judicial activism may not really be in the interest of the will of the majority. The main pointers to prove that it is antithetical means it is opposite or it is detrimental to the separation of powers. The main pointers that prove it: number one, it undermines a democratic process. See, at the end of the day, when you have elected a government, when the government has the power of the majority, the government should have the power to make the laws, the government should have the power to change the constitution as and when required. Secondly, judiciary may not always have the domain expertise to make laws that they do. You can't expect the judges to say that we know everything. There may be some things that they are not really aware of. Rather than leaving it to the legislature to make laws, to make changes in the constitution, judiciary takes it upon its own hands. It also leads to imbalance of power. There is clear separation of power in our constitution. Legislature supposed to make laws, executive supposed to implement laws, judiciary is supposed to decide whether laws are right or wrong. When the judiciary starts doing the job of the legislative, you have a situation of imbalance of power. On the other hand, there are many pointers that point out towards the positive side of judicial activism as well. How judicial activism has helped India in the past. First, it has upheld the constitutional principles. You know, when Indira Gandhi government was in power, they were introducing a huge number of constitutional amendments, including one of the constitutional amendment that they had introduced said that if someone becomes a prime minister, president, governor, vice president for even one single day, they will get lifelong immunity. Thankfully, it was struck down by the Supreme Court because it used judicial activism. Also, the separation of power is not watertight. You can't say that judiciary can do this, cannot do this, because at the end of the day, Constitution itself, under Article 142, has given that power to the Supreme Court to make sure that they can do complete justice in the society, giving whatever kind of judgment or decree that they want. It has enabled the Supreme Court to protect fundamental rights, start new initiatives such as a PIL, which is not mentioned in the Constitution. It allows the judiciary to interpret the Constitution and even ensure that the supremacy of the Constitution is upheld. All of these are examples to prove how we have ensured that judicial activism does not go against the concept of the will of the majority. All these are positive pointers about how the judicial activism should be allowed rather than going ahead and implementing just whatever the will of the parliament is. Piyush is saying which amendment was that? Piyush, it was 41st. Read about 41st Amendment, read about 39th Amendment, and see what are the different things that the government had wanted to do. Question number 19 was, in the effort to make India a self-reliant nation, a larger focus should be on making panchayats and local bodies more people-driven. In light of the statement, highlight the critical challenges faced by local institutions in recent times and suggest measures to address them. So simple, you have to write about the challenges faced by local institutions such as the panchayat, and you also have to suggest the ways to address those challenges as well. I'm sure when you read about panchayats, municipalities, all of you would have read about the challenges of the panchayat. Financial challenge, not enough money. That's the problem with almost every level of government in India. They just don't have enough money. Functional challenge, they have not been given enough responsibility. They have not been given responsibility. The reason being, giving of power, giving of responsibility, all of these are voluntary provisions in the 73rd Constitution Amendment Act. These are not mandatory. The government may or may not give them these things. There are functional challenges in the sense they don't have enough skilled people to work for them. There's a problem of functionality, meaning that there are many other different organizations doing the same kind of job that they are doing. So powers get divided, money that is granted to them gets divided. Like we have the smart city mission doing the similar kind of a thing, building urban infrastructure that is again supposed to have, or that is supposed to be built by municipalities. We also have weak accountability mechanism. If you have a problem against the panchayat, if you have a problem against the municipality, there are not many places that you can go to. All these are challenges faced by local institutions. Then suggestions. Whenever in any question you have to write suggestions after the problems, you can just write the opposite pointers and that would be true. Strengthen them by giving them more fiscal support. Give them training to ensure that they have skilled personnel to do their job. Encourage participation of the people. Hold them more accountable. Have social inclusion. Include those communities which feel left out, SC, ST, etc. So all the problems that you wrote here, you write opposite to these one by one, opposite of every point, and you will automatically get the suggestions or the solutions. Writing solution is the easiest part if you know the problem. Just write opposite one by one and you will get to the answer. Use technology to improve the working of the panchayat, working of the urban local body so that they can be much more effective. Last question that we had is about the CAG, question number 20. The CAG is one of the bulwarks of the democratic system of the government of India. In this context, analyze the challenges pertaining to the independence and neutrality of the office of the CAG. So basically, you have to write about what challenges does the CAG face in being independent and in being neutral in its working. First, the appointment challenge. As you know, the CAG is appointed by the President of India on the advice of just the Council of Ministers led by the Prime Minister. There is no committee as such to advise. There is no committee to find out a name. There is not even any eligibility criteria. There is no eligibility criteria that tells you who shall be the CAG, who shall not be the CAG. CAG still, although it is an independent body, it's supposed to work independently. The CAG's budget is still under control of the Ministry of Finance. Thousands of staff works for the CAG. Their salaries, their pension, all of that, for that the budget can only be approved if the Finance Commission says yes. Sorry, Finance Ministry says yes. So they are dependent on the Finance Ministry. Audit mandate. The government may not cooperate with the CAG's auditing process. Why? The CAG has to ask for bill, invoice from a lot of government ministries, departments, and they delay the process. They don't send the bill, they don't send the invoice to the CAG. That leads to delay in the auditing process. In the end, the post-retirement benefits. Since the CAG wants post-retirement benefits, they make sure that they are in good books of the government. Although officially the CAG cannot be reappointed to any government position, but there are loopholes. Loopholes such as government can appoint CAG as a head of certain commission, as a head of certain committee, which is officially not a government position. So they favor the government in order to have these kind of positions after the retirement. Vidya Bhushan Singh, CAG of India, is from my village. Oh, nice. Mr. G.C. Murmu is a CAG, Girish Chandra Murmu. This brings us to the end of today's discussion of paper number 3 in this main test series, paper of GS2. I hope that you learned a lot of new things from this. Please keep on attending each and every paper. Doesn't matter how many questions you know, how many questions you do not know. One of the biggest mistakes that students commit, they don't write answers. They think I'll write answers later on. Let me complete the syllabus. I'll do this later on. Please don't do that. Write answers as soon as possible. Even if you know half of them, you will anyways get model answers so that you can learn from them and improve your answers. All the very best for your next paper in the next week. I'll see you soon. Bye bye. Have a good day. Jai Hind.